Currently, Indonesia is facing the issue of terrorism, such as bombing in several places recently, and environmental destruction, such as pollution everywhere. As educators, we have the responsibility to guide our students so they too can avoid these global issues. Thus, we will discuss the term of global education. Now, what is global education?
Global education promotes positive values and assists students to take responsibility for their actions and to see themselves as global citizens who can contribute to a more peaceful, justice, and sustainable world.
There are four goals of global approach of education. Number 1, knowledge about world problems. Number 2, acquiring skills. Number 3, acquiring global attitudes. And finally, the tangible action. Take for example, if one wants to do community service, the first thing that needs to be done is reading further about that community service. And then, the next thing that can be done is to do a group discussion to acquire the necessary skills in community service. And then, focus group discussion might be necessary to increase the global attitudes that might be helpful when doing community service. And then finally, the group can take the community service into a real action.
There are four hypotheses of global education. First, our planet faces serious global issues or world problems, such as terrorism, racism, environmental disasters, and discrimination. Second, interdependence of our modern world, because nowadays we are interconnected to the global, and it is impossible to ignore the problems happen in the world, because it might also influence to ourselves. Taking an example, the weakening of rupiah to dollar US causing a high price level of certain stuffs, and also economic condition in Indonesia. Third, the attitude of apathy, selfishness, and ignorance many young people. It can be seen when there is an accident, and nowadays some people tend to record and upload that accident to social media rather than directly help the victim. The fourth, current education system. It refers to some education systems that limit the teachers to develop their teaching. As the result, the learning process tends to be more passive, so it discourages students to think critically. So why teachers should care about work problem? The first is because language teaching is a profession, which means teachers have moral responsibility to the society of their skills. The second is because the status within the field of education, which are promoting justice, peace, and active concern of world problem.
Due to that status, there are four recommendations coming from UNESCO. Number 1. Teachers should be aware of the responsibility to increase international understanding through teaching. This point is not really contextual in Indonesia context because some teacher in Indonesia still is self-oriented in teaching. Number 2. Increase language teaching effectiveness to enhance mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and cooperation among nations. This is contextual in Indonesia context, seeing that Indonesia has a lot of diversity among the students, so it can be implemented in Indonesia. Number 3. Exploit extracurricular programs such as penpal program to develop international understanding. Some school in Indonesia has already implemented this kind of programs, so this is contextual and could be implemented in Indonesia. Number 4. Lay the basis for international understanding through classroom cooperation using language teaching approaches that is in line with students' interests and needs. In Indonesia, several schools is still self-oriented in conducting their own curriculum. So this is not really contextual in Indonesia context. So it might be hard to
What a language educator perceives to take responsibility for helping humans to care each other in order to prevent the global issues that might become as a threat for living things. For example, inside the class, the teacher should teach diversity between each other is alright, and it is not an obstacle to work together with someone who have different identities. In the classroom content, the teacher has flexibility to make a content. It is mean that the content it can be anything as long as the teacher could connect it with the learning activity. For example, students in Indonesia learn vocabularies from a passage about global warming issues. Basically, this content is applicable for students in Indonesia because the content can be accepted by our culture, and the content is also one of the part of global issues, so it can be adapted to our learning activity. For the second one, in teaching method, so teaching method of nowadays is focusing on students, so it means that it can be called as student-centered, which means the student need to be active in learning, and the teacher needs to stimulate student experiential learning, and then beside that the teacher can do a role play for the learning activity, and student can learn a language through communication with their friend and each other. In material, the teacher needs to introduce the global issues through reading in order to build student knowledge, attitude, and skills. These three things need to be synergy, and from that the ability will be appear. In course design, here the teacher needs to design the course material related to global issues. It can be as a reading material in order to build student ability in language lesson, attempting to bring a global perspective with the learning process. For example, students focus on a word problem, then the teacher can modify the activities such as doing a role play, discussion, which students can practice their English because they will communicate with each other. And the next one is extracurricular. Here, the teacher can merge the global issues together with the study of foreign language through these activities, which are volunteering, charity, and school trip. For charity and school trip, we think that it is applicable for students in Indonesia because sometimes students in Indonesia will do that, while the volunteering is commonly not be used by students, especially from the junior high school to senior high school. The next one is teacher training. In teacher training, teachers allowed to improve their teaching methodology and language skill while using English to explore the global issues including the world cultures. So the example is teacher taking TESOL class, and in TESOL class they will discuss with the other teacher in order to find a solution for some problem that happened in education, especially for foreign students. And beyond the classroom, the teacher need to stimulate students through daily life activities to have a better world. So the example, like teacher teach the student that bicycling is important for human health, and the other example is someone need use the public transportation because it is important to reduce the traffic jam in a city. And the last is applying the 3R, which are reduce, reuse, and recycle in order to save our planet. So those are the example that teacher can show to the students.
So everyone, please note that the future of the world is in the hand of the next generation. The next generation is in the hand of their educator. So, the future of the world is in the hand of the current educator. So, if we want a better world for ourselves, so let's start from being a better educator for this world and for this next generation. Thank you for the attention and have a nice day.